On a frost-touched morning in November 2001, in a quiet suburban neighborhood where children rode bicycles down tree-lined streets and neighbors knew each other's names, a woman vanished without a trace. Her car sat in the driveway. Her purse remained on the kitchen counter. The coffee maker still held half a pot, still warm. 38-year-old Michelle Brennan left behind 2 children, a husband, and a life that seemed, to all who knew her, unremarkable in its contentment. But in the hours after her disappearance, as police officers walked through her home with growing unease, they began to notice things. Small things. A wedding photo turned face down on the mantel. A suitcase partially packed in the upstairs bedroom closet. A life insurance policy, recently doubled, tucked inside a desk drawer. The question that would haunt investigators for nearly 2 decades was not simply where Michelle Brennan had gone, but whether she had left at all. The township of Millbrook sits in the rolling hills of northern New Jersey, 30 miles west of Newark, far enough from the city's pulse to feel suburban, close enough that commuter trains still ran on schedule. In 2001, Millbrook was a town of approximately 14,000 people, mostly middle-class families who had moved there in the previous decade seeking good schools and safe streets. The downtown consisted of a main street with a hardware store, a diner called Murphy's that served breakfast all day, a small library built in 1923, and a police department housed in a brick building that had once been a schoolhouse. The neighborhood sprawled outward from this center, in concentric circles of ranch homes and split levels built in the 1960s and 70s. Their yards large enough for swing sets and above-ground pools, their driveways wide enough for 2 cars. Michelle and David Brennan had lived at 247 Oakwood Drive for 6 years. The house was a pale yellow split level with white shutters and a maple tree in the front yard that turned brilliant red each autumn. David Brennan worked as an insurance adjuster for a regional company, leaving each morning at 7:15 and returning most evenings by 6:30. Michelle had been a part-time bookkeeper for a veterinary clinic until their second child was born, after which she stayed home. Their daughter Emma was 7 years old that November, a second grader who wore her brown hair in 2 braids and carried a purple backpack decorated with stars. Their son Tyler had just turned 4, a quiet child who preferred building blocks to outdoor play and who still asked his mother to lie beside him until he fell asleep each night. Those who knew Michelle Brennan described her as organized, punctual, and deeply devoted to routine. She woke each weekday at 6 o'clock. She prepared breakfast for her children. She walked Emma to the bus stop at the end of the street at 7:45, Tyler's small hand in hers. She returned home to tidy the kitchen, start a load of laundry, plan dinner. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, she volunteered in Emma's classroom, helping students with reading exercises. On Wednesday afternoons, she attended a book club at the library with 3 other mothers from the neighborhood. She kept a calendar on the refrigerator where she marked appointments, playdates, and school events in neat blue ink. Her life moved according to patterns that could be predicted, relied upon, trusted. November 14th, 2001 began as an ordinary Wednesday. The temperature at dawn was 34 degrees. A thin frost covered the lawns along Oakwood Drive, melting slowly as pale sunlight broke through the bare branches of trees. David Brennan left for work at his usual time, kissing Michelle goodbye in the kitchen while she stood at the stove scrambling eggs. Emma ate her breakfast at the table, chattering about a field trip to a pumpkin farm the previous week. Tyler sat in his booster seat, moving Cheerios from his bowl to his mouth one at a time with focused concentration. At 7:43, Michelle walked Emma to the bus stop. Mrs. Patricia Hoffman, who lived 3 houses down and whose own daughter rode the same bus, saw them approaching. She would later tell police that Michelle wore jeans, brown boots, and a cream-colored sweater under a navy jacket. Her hair was pulled back in a low ponytail. She smiled and waved. The bus arrived at 7:47. Emma climbed aboard. Michelle watched until the bus turned the corner onto Maple Street, as she always did, then walked back toward her house with Tyler beside her, his hand still clasped in hers. Mrs. Hoffman went inside her own home. She did not see Michelle again. At 2:15 that afternoon, the school bus returned Emma Brennan to the same corner where it had collected her that morning. Emma walked alone to her house, her purple backpack bouncing against her shoulders. She found the front door locked. She knocked. No one answered. She knocked again, harder. She waited. The November air had grown colder as afternoon shadows lengthened. Emma tried the handle of the garage door. It lifted easily. Inside, both family cars sat in their usual places. David's gray sedan on the left, Michelle's white SUV on the right. Emma entered the house through the door that connected the garage to the kitchen. The kitchen was silent. The breakfast dishes had been washed and placed in the drying rack beside the sink. A pot of coffee sat on the counter half full. Emma called for her mother. No answer came. She walked through the first floor, past the living room where Tyler's toys lay scattered on the carpet, through the dining room where the table was set with placemats but no dishes. She climbed the stairs to the second floor. Her parents' bedroom door stood open. The bed was made, its blue comforter smooth and unwrinkled. Tyler's room was empty, his bed also made, his stuffed animals arranged on the pillow. Emma was 7 years old and had been taught not to panic, but a coldness was spreading through her chest. She descended the stairs and picked up the telephone in the kitchen, dialing her father's work number that she had memorized for emergencies. David Brennan answered on the third ring. His daughter's voice was small and uncertain. She told him she was home alone. She told him she could not find her mother or Tyler. She told him the cars were both in the garage. David Brennan told his daughter to lock the doors and wait in the living room. He said he would be home immediately. He hung up the phone and left his office without explanation, driving the 32-mile route from his workplace in West Orange to Millbrook in 28 minutes. He arrived at his house at 2:51. Emma met him at the door. Together they walked through the house again, calling Michelle's name, opening closets, checking bathrooms. Tyler's coat hung on its hook by the back door. His shoes were lined up beneath it. Michelle's purse sat on the kitchen counter, her wallet inside, $43 in cash still tucked in the billfold. Her cell phone lay beside it, fully charged, showing no missed calls. At 3:17, David Brennan dialed 911. The first patrol car arrived at 247 Oakwood Drive at 3:24. Officers James Chen and Rebecca Torres stepped out of their vehicle and approached the house where David Brennan stood on the front porch, his arm around his daughter's shoulders. Officer Chen, who had been with the Millbrook Police Department for 11 years, asked David to describe when he had last seen his wife. David explained the morning routine, the goodbye in the kitchen, his departure for work at 7:15. Officer Torres asked if Michelle had mentioned any plans for the day, any appointments or errands. David shook his head. Wednesday was book club day at the library, he said, but Michelle would not have left for that until 1:30, and she would have been back before Emma's bus arrived. The officers entered the house. They moved methodically through each room, their eyes trained to notice disturbance, signs of struggle, anything out of place. The first floor appeared orderly. In the living room, toys suggested a child had been playing there recently, but nothing seemed overturned or scattered in haste. The kitchen was clean except for the pot of coffee and a single mug in the sink. Upstairs, the bedrooms were tidy. In the master bedroom, Officer Torres opened the closet. On the left side, David's clothes hung in organized rows. On the right side, Michelle's clothing occupied approximately 2/3 of the space. Officer Torres noted that several empty hangers swung at the far end of the rod. She asked David if his wife's suitcase was in the house. David went to check the hall closet where they kept luggage. He returned and said one of the smaller suitcases was missing. Officer Chen asked David if there had been any arguments recently, any indication Michelle might have wanted to leave. David's face flushed. He said no, nothing like that. His voice carried an edge of indignation. Officer Chen softened his tone and explained they were simply trying to understand the situation. He asked about Tyler. David said his son had been with Michelle when he left that morning. He said Tyler would not have gone anywhere without his mother, and his mother would never have left Emma to come home to an empty house. His voice broke slightly on the last words. At 4:30, as daylight began to fade, additional officers arrived. They organized a search of the immediate neighborhood. Teams of 2 officers each knocked on doors along Oakwood Drive and the surrounding streets, asking residents if they had seen Michelle Brennan or a small boy with light brown hair wearing a red jacket. Most residents had been at work during the day. Those who had been home reported seeing nothing unusual. Mrs. Hoffman, from 3 houses down, repeated what she had told police earlier about seeing Michelle at the bus stop that morning. She added that Michelle had seemed perfectly normal, smiling and chatting briefly about the cold weather. Mrs. Hoffman said she had not heard or seen anything else after that. She had spent most of the day inside preparing for a dinner party that weekend. Mr. Raymond Cross, who lived directly across the street at 248 Oakwood Drive, told officers he had been home all day recovering from a minor surgical procedure. He had sat in his recliner near the front window watching television. He said he saw Michelle return from the bus stop with Tyler sometime around 8 in the morning. He could not be more specific about the time. He said he dozed off and on throughout the day. He did not remember seeing anyone approach the Brennan house. He did not remember seeing Michelle or Tyler leave. By 6 o'clock, darkness had settled over Millbrook. The temperature dropped to 28 degrees. Search teams expanded their radius, moving through nearby parks and wooded areas with flashlights. Volunteers from the neighborhood joined, forming lines and walking slowly through bare trees, calling Michelle's name, calling for Tyler. Their voices echoed in the cold November air. No response came. At 7:30, Detective Sarah Martinez arrived at 247 Oakwood Drive. Martinez had been with the department for 16 years, the last 7 as a detective investigating everything from burglaries to assaults. She was 41 years old, methodical in her approach, known among her colleagues for noticing details others missed. She found David Brennan sitting at his kitchen table, Emma beside him drawing pictures with colored pencils to occupy herself. An officer had taken Emma's statement earlier, a brief recounting of arriving home to find the house empty. Detective Martinez asked David if she could speak with him privately. They moved into the living room. Martinez asked David to walk her through the morning again, this time with more specificity. What had they discussed at breakfast? Had Michelle seemed worried about anything? Had there been any phone calls before he left? David repeated much of what he had already told the responding officers, but as Martinez listened, she made notes about what he emphasized and what he omitted. He mentioned twice that Michelle had kissed him goodbye, as if this detail mattered, as if it proved something. Martinez asked about their relationship. David said it was fine, they were happy. Martinez asked if Michelle had friends she might have gone to visit. David named 2 women from the book club but said Michelle would have mentioned plans like that. She would not have just left. Martinez asked about Tyler. She asked if the boy had any health issues, any special needs, anything that would require immediate attention or regular medication. David said no, Tyler was healthy, a normal 4-year-old. Martinez asked if David's wife had seemed stressed lately, overwhelmed with parenting or household responsibilities. David bristled. He said Michelle was an excellent mother. She loved their children. She would never abandon them. Martinez noted the defensiveness. She also noted that David had not asked certain questions that seemed natural for a husband whose wife had disappeared. He had not asked if police thought Michelle might be hurt somewhere, if they believed someone had taken her. Instead, his responses seemed focused on defending Michelle's character and their marriage. Martinez filed this observation away and asked David about the suitcase. How long had it been missing? When had he last seen it? David said he could not remember specifically. They did not travel often. He thought they had last used it in the summer when they visited Michelle's parents in Pennsylvania. Martinez asked for the names and contact information of Michelle's parents, her siblings, her close friends. David provided what he could. Martinez asked if David would be willing to let officers search the house more thoroughly, including his vehicles and any storage areas. David agreed immediately, even asked what took so long to request this. Martinez studied his face. His eyes were red-rimmed but dry. His hands trembled slightly. He looked like a man barely holding himself together, which could mean anything. Officers conducted a thorough search of the house after Emma was taken to stay with a neighbor. They examined the master bedroom in detail, noting the made bed, the closed curtains, the layer of dust on the dresser that suggested it had not been disturbed recently. In the closet, they photographed the empty hangers. They searched drawers and found nothing unusual except a life insurance policy in David's bedside table drawer. The policy had been taken out 3 months earlier, in August. It listed Michelle as the insured party with a benefit of $500,000, up from the previous policy of $250,000. David had signed as the policyholder and beneficiary. In Tyler's room, officers found the boy's clothes still in his dresser drawers, his favorite stuffed bear still on his bed, his red jacket hanging on the hook by the back door downstairs. If Michelle had taken Tyler somewhere, she had not packed his things or dressed him warmly for the 30-degree weather. In the bathroom, Michelle's toothbrush remained in the holder. Her prescription bottle of allergy medication sat in the medicine cabinet, nearly full. Downstairs in the kitchen, officers examined the coffee pot. It held approximately 3 cups of coffee, still barely warm to the touch. The mug in the sink had a trace of lipstick on the rim, the same shade Michelle wore in family photos displayed throughout the house. On the refrigerator, the calendar showed Emma's dentist appointment scheduled for the following Monday. Michelle had written it in blue ink just 4 days earlier, according to David. The week after that showed Thanksgiving break marked with a star. In the garage, officers inspected both vehicles. David's sedan was clean, its interior showing normal signs of commuter use. Coffee cup in the holder, loose change in the center console, a briefcase in the back seat. Michelle's SUV was equally tidy. The odometer showed 73,412 miles. Officers noted this number. They also noted that the driver's seat was pushed back farther than seemed appropriate for a woman of Michelle's height, which David said was 5 feet 4 inches. The gas tank was 3/4 full. By midnight, the initial search had produced no sign of Michelle or Tyler. Officers had canvassed a 2-mile radius. They had checked local hospitals. They had contacted Michelle's parents in Pennsylvania, who had not heard from their daughter, and who drove immediately to New Jersey in a state of shock and fear. They had called Michelle's brother in Ohio, her college roommate in Vermont, the veterinary clinic where she used to work. No one had seen her. No one had received any communication from her. The book club friends confirmed she had not appeared at the library that afternoon, which was unusual because Michelle rarely missed their Wednesday meetings. Detective Martinez stood in the Brennan driveway at 12:30 in the morning, her breath visible in the frozen air. Around her, the neighborhood was dark and quiet. Porch lights glowed at intervals along the street. In the distance, she could hear search teams still calling Michelle's name in the woods behind the elementary school. Martinez thought about the made bed, the coffee pot, the missing suitcase, the life insurance policy, the empty hangers. She thought about David Brennan's careful answers, his focus on defending rather than questioning. She thought about a 4-year-old boy whose jacket hung unused while the temperature dropped below freezing. Those who have ever felt something wrong but could not name it, something that exists in the spaces between words, in the things left unsaid, will understand what Detective Martinez felt standing in that driveway. The house looked peaceful. The cars sat properly in the garage. Nothing appeared violent or disturbed, and yet everything felt wrong. The wrongness sat heavy in the air like a presence, patient and waiting. By morning, Millbrook had become the center of a missing persons case that would draw regional media attention. News vans arrived on Oakwood Drive by 8 o'clock. Reporters stood on neighbors' lawns conducting interviews. The Millbrook Police Department set up a command center in the community room of the public library. Volunteers streamed in offering to help search. Someone had printed flyers with Michelle's photograph and description. White female, 38 years old, 5 feet 4 inches, 120 pounds, brown hair, green eyes. Last seen wearing jeans, brown boots, cream sweater, navy jacket. Below Michelle's information was Tyler's. White male, 4 years old, 3 feet 2 inches, 35 pounds, light brown hair, blue eyes, possibly wearing red jacket. The flyers were distributed throughout Millbrook and neighboring towns. They were posted in shop windows, on telephone poles, at gas stations. Local news stations ran segments showing Michelle's photo and asking anyone with information to contact police. The Brennan house became a hub of activity. Michelle's parents stayed there, her mother moving through the rooms as if searching for something she had lost, touching her daughter's things, folding and refolding Tyler's small shirts. David's parents drove in from Connecticut. Family members answered phone calls from well-wishers and reporters. David gave a brief statement to the media gathered on his lawn, standing stiffly and reading from a paper his brother had helped him write. He said Michelle was a devoted mother and wife. He said he could not imagine where she might be. He said if anyone knew anything, please come forward. His voice remained steady throughout. He did not cry. On the second day, police brought in search dogs. The dogs were given items of Michelle's clothing to scent. They searched the woods behind the elementary school, the parks, the undeveloped land at the edge of town. They alerted in Tyler's bedroom, following the scent to the garage, then losing it outside on the driveway. This suggested Tyler had been carried or transported in a vehicle. The dogs searched again, starting from the garage. They picked up a faint trail leading to Michelle's SUV, but could not track beyond that point. Detective Martinez obtained search warrants for phone records and financial statements. Michelle's cell phone showed no activity after 7:30 on the morning of her disappearance. Her last call had been incoming from the veterinary clinic, where she used to work. A brief conversation about possibly picking up holiday hours in December. Michelle had said she would think about it and call back. She never did. David's cell phone showed normal activity. He had made calls to clients, received calls from his office, sent text messages about work matters. At 2:17 on the day Michelle disappeared, David had called his home number. The call lasted 4 seconds, just long enough for the answering machine to pick up before he disconnected. When asked about this, David said he had been checking if Michelle was home, though he did not explain why he had not left a message or why this call had occurred before Emma's school day ended. Financial records showed the Brennans' checking account held approximately $8,000. Their savings account held $23,000. Credit card statements revealed normal spending patterns: groceries, gas, children's clothing, occasional restaurant meals. There were no large or unusual withdrawals. No purchases of items that seemed connected to planning a disappearance or a crime. The only notable transaction was the payment for the increased life insurance policy, which had cost an additional $68 per month. On the third day, Detective Martinez interviewed David Brennan formally at the police station. She asked him to account for his movements on November 14th. David explained he had arrived at work at 8:15, checked in at the front desk where a receptionist would have seen him, attended a 9 o'clock meeting with 4 colleagues to discuss claim procedures, worked at his desk reviewing files until lunch, eaten at his desk, continued working, taken the call from Emma at 2:15, and left immediately. Martinez asked for the names of the colleagues in the meeting. David provided them. She asked if anyone could verify he had been at his desk during the hours between the meeting and Emma's call. David said people walked past his office throughout the day, but he could not name specific times or witnesses. Martinez asked about the life insurance policy. David explained that he had increased it because he was the sole income for the family and wanted to ensure Michelle and the children would be financially secure if something happened to him. Martinez pointed out that the policy was on Michelle's life, not his. David paused, then said he had gotten both policies increased, that he had a matching one. Martinez made a note to verify this. It would turn out later that David's policy had remained at the same amount, unchanged. Martinez asked about the suitcase. David said he assumed Michelle had used it to pack some things, though he could not explain what things or why. Martinez asked if they had been having problems. David said no. She asked if he was having an affair. David said no. She asked if Michelle was having an affair. David said absolutely not. Martinez asked if he had any theories about what happened. David said he thought someone must have taken Michelle and Tyler, some stranger, some predator. Martinez asked why this person would have given Michelle time to pack a suitcase. David had no answer. Those who have ever sat across from someone telling a story that does not quite fit will recognize the expression on Detective Martinez's face as she listened to David Brennan. She did not disbelieve him entirely. She did not accuse him of lying, but she recognized the way his answers shaped themselves around gaps, the way he provided explanations that were possible but not probable. A woman who is abducted does not pack a suitcase. A woman who runs away does not leave her purse, her money, her phone. A woman who plans to meet someone does not make the bed and wash the breakfast dishes first. Unless the bed was made and the dishes were washed to create a particular appearance. Unless the suitcase was packed by someone other than Michelle. Unless the story being told was not the story that had happened. By the end of the first week, the massive search operations began to scale back. Hundreds of volunteers had combed through every accessible area within 10 miles of Millbrook. Divers had searched the reservoir. Officers had checked abandoned buildings. Nothing had been found. No witnesses had come forward with credible sightings. Michelle and Tyler Brennan had simply vanished, leaving behind a house that looked like they might return any moment, and a family that was fracturing under the weight of not knowing. The media continued to cover the story, though with decreasing frequency. David gave another press conference, this one at the request of police who hoped Michelle might be watching. He spoke directly to the camera, asking Michelle to please come home, to please let them know she and Tyler were safe. Behind him stood Emma, silent and pale, her purple backpack at her feet as if she had just come from school. The image of the 7-year-old girl missing her mother became iconic in regional news coverage. Tips flooded the police department after the press conference, but all led nowhere. Detective Martinez continued to work the case, but as days turned to weeks, the investigation shifted from active emergency to methodical detective work. She compiled detailed timelines. She interviewed David's coworkers, all of whom confirmed he had been at work on November 14th, though none could account for every moment of his day. She interviewed neighbors again, asking more specific questions. She spoke with Michelle's book club friends, who described Michelle as quiet, organized, private. One friend mentioned that Michelle had seemed tired lately. Another said Michelle had once commented that motherhood was more isolating than she had expected. None of them believed Michelle would simply walk away from her life. Martinez interviewed Emma Brennan again, this time with a child psychologist present. Emma was asked to draw pictures of her family, her house, her last morning with her mother. The drawings were analyzed for signs of trauma or hidden information. Emma drew her mother with a smile. She drew Tyler holding his stuffed bear. She drew their house with flowers in the front yard, though it had been November and no flowers were blooming. When asked about the morning her mother disappeared, Emma said they had eaten breakfast like normal. She said Tyler had been playing with blocks in the living room. She said her mother had walked her to the bus stop and waved goodbye. Emma's voice did not waver. Her hands did not shake. She was 7 years old and had learned already that some questions have no answers. As December arrived, bringing the first significant snowfall, the Brennan case remained unsolved. Michelle's parents returned to Pennsylvania, though her mother called the police department daily asking if there had been any developments. David hired a private investigator, a move that could be interpreted as the action of a desperate husband or a calculated attempt to appear cooperative. The private investigator found nothing the police had not already discovered. The case began to go cold, not because investigators stopped caring, but because there were no new leads to pursue, no evidence to analyze, no witnesses to interview who had not already been interviewed multiple times. Christmas came. David and Emma spent it with David's parents in Connecticut. The media ran anniversary stories, 1 month since New Jersey mother and son vanished. Then, 6 weeks and still no answers in Brennan disappearance. The public's attention gradually shifted to other tragedies, other mysteries. Life in Millbrook continued. Children rode the school bus. Neighbors cleared snow from their driveways. The house at 247 Oakwood Drive stood quiet through the winter, its windows dark, its driveway empty. In February of 2002, David and Emma moved out of the house on Oakwood Drive. David told neighbors they needed a fresh start, that living in the house was too painful. They relocated to an apartment in the neighboring town of Fairfield, smaller and closer to David's workplace. David sold the house fully furnished, unwilling to sort through Michelle's belongings or pack up Tyler's toys. The new owners, a young couple expecting their first child, repainted the rooms and replaced the carpet but found themselves uncomfortable in the space. They reported feeling watched. They mentioned it casually to neighbors, laughing at their own superstition, but 2 years later they too moved out. The house would change hands 3 more times in the following decade, never holding a family for more than a few years. Those who lived there spoke of cold spots in the master bedroom, of hearing footsteps on the stairs late at night, of an inexplicable sadness that seemed to seep from the walls. Detective Martinez kept the Brennan file on her desk. She reviewed it periodically, looking for something she might have missed. She drove past the house on Oakwood Drive occasionally, though she could never articulate why. She thought about Michelle's green eyes in the photograph, about Tyler's gap-toothed smile in his preschool picture. She thought about the suitcase that was never found, about the coffee that had gone cold in its pot, about the life insurance policy that had been doubled 3 months before a woman disappeared. For David Brennan, life reorganized itself around the absence that defined everything. He continued to work as an insurance adjuster. He attended parent-teacher conferences for Emma. He dated occasionally but never seriously. When people asked what had happened to his wife, he gave brief answers that shut down further questions. He said she had disappeared. He said police had investigated but found nothing. He said he hoped she was alive somewhere. His voice carried the weariness of a story told too many times. Emma grew up marked by the mystery of her mother's disappearance. She attended school, made friends, played soccer, participated in drama club. But there was always something held back, some part of her that remained cautious. She did not talk about her mother. When her 6th grade class did family history projects, Emma wrote about her grandparents instead. Her teachers noted in conferences that Emma was bright and responsible but emotionally guarded. She excelled academically, as if achievement could fill the space left by unanswered questions. For those who have ever doubted someone you love, who have noticed small inconsistencies and pushed them away, because acknowledging them would mean accepting something unbearable, Emma Brennan's childhood will be familiar. Children are perceptive. They notice what adults think they hide. They sense tension in the careful way subjects are avoided. They feel the weight of secrets even when they cannot name what those secrets are. Emma knew her father kept things from her. She could feel it in the way he changed subjects when she asked about her mother, in the way he grew tense when police called with updates, in the way certain dates, November 14th, Tyler's birthday, Mother's Day, pass with careful silence. In 2005, when Emma was 11 years old, she began having nightmares. She dreamed of her brother calling for her. She dreamed of cold water and darkness. She dreamed of the house on Oakwood Drive, its rooms empty and echoing. She woke gasping, and her father would sit on the edge of her bed telling her everything was okay, telling her to go back to sleep. But Emma noticed things. She noticed her father's hands shaking. She noticed he could not meet her eyes. She noticed that when he said everything was okay, he sounded like he was trying to convince himself. In 2007, Emma was 13 and spent a week at summer camp. While she was gone, David cleaned out the storage unit where he had placed items from the Oakwood Drive house. He hired a junk removal service to take everything except a few photo albums and Emma's baby clothes. Michelle's clothes, Tyler's toys, the furniture from their shared life. All of it was hauled away and disposed of. When Emma returned from camp and asked where a particular photo album had gone, David said he had not realized she would want it, that he had been trying to give them both a clean slate. Emma did not argue, but something hardened in her. She was beginning to understand that the story she had been told was incomplete. In 2010, Emma was 16 and applying to colleges. She selected schools far from New Jersey, places where no one would know her story. Her father supported this decision, even encouraged it, which Emma found both relieving and suspicious. She wondered if he wanted her gone so he could finally stop maintaining whatever facade he had constructed. She wondered if her presence was a constant reminder of things he wished to forget. She wondered, increasingly, if her father knew more than he had ever admitted about what had happened that November morning 9 years earlier. The breaking point came on a Saturday afternoon in March of 2011. Emma was 17, months away from graduating high school. She had come home from a friend's house earlier than expected and had gone upstairs to her room. Her father was in his bedroom with the door partially closed, talking on the phone. Emma heard her name mentioned. She heard her father say, "She asks questions sometimes, but I don't think she knows anything." There was a pause. Then, "No, I told you that part is taken care of. It's been almost 10 years. No one is looking anymore." Emma stood in the hallway, her heart pounding against her ribs. She did not hear the rest of the conversation. She went to her room and closed the door quietly. She sat on her bed, trembling. "That part is taken care of. No one is looking anymore." The words replayed in her mind. She thought of her mother's smile at the bus stop. She thought of Tyler's hand in hers. She thought of 16 years of living with someone she had trusted because he was her father, because children are supposed to trust their fathers. And she thought of Detective Sarah Martinez, whose business card her grandmother had given her years ago with the instruction that if Emma ever needed to talk, Detective Martinez would listen. Emma waited until her father left the apartment that evening to run errands. Then she called the number on the card. Detective Martinez answered on the second ring. She had retired from the Millbrook Police Department 3 years earlier, but had kept her cell phone number. When Emma identified herself, there was a long pause. Then Martinez said, "I have been hoping you would call." They met the following morning at a coffee shop in a town neither of them lived in, a neutral location where they would not be seen by anyone who might recognize them. Emma, now 17 and looking more like her mother than she knew, sat across from the woman who had investigated her family's tragedy. Emma said, "I think my father knows what happened to my mother and brother." Martinez did not seem surprised. She asked Emma to explain why she believed this. Emma described the phone conversation she had overheard. She described years of her father's careful avoidance, his destruction of evidence, his nervousness when certain subjects arose. She described the feeling that had lived in her chest for as long as she could remember, the feeling that nothing was as it seemed. Martinez listened without interrupting. When Emma finished, Martinez was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I have always believed your father was involved, but I could never prove it." Martinez explained that the investigation had focused on David from the beginning, but without evidence, without witnesses, without bodies. There was nothing to charge him with. The case was circumstantial at best. The increased life insurance policy was suspicious, but not illegal. His inability to account for every moment of his workday meant nothing without proof he had left work. The packed suitcase suggested premeditation, but could have a dozen innocent explanations. The case had gone cold not because investigators had given up, but because they had exhausted every avenue of inquiry. Martinez said, "The only person who could break this case open is someone who knows what really happened, someone he might have told, someone he trusted." Emma said, "He's never told me anything." Martinez nodded. She said, "I didn't think he had, but you can help another way. You can watch him, you can listen. And if he does something, says something, meets with someone, anything unusual, you can let me know." For those who have ever been asked to surveil someone they love, to become an informant against family, the weight of what Martinez was suggesting will be clear. Emma was 17 years old. David was all the family she had left in her daily life, all the stability she had known since that November morning 10 years earlier. And yet she had loved her mother, she had loved her brother, and the questions that had no answers were slowly consuming her from the inside out. Emma agreed. For the next several months, she paid attention in ways she never had before. She noted her father's phone calls, his meetings, his moods. She watched him closely, looking for cracks in the careful performance of normalcy he maintained. And on a Tuesday evening in August, those cracks appeared. David received a phone call while Emma was in the kitchen making dinner. He glanced at her, then stepped out onto the apartment's small balcony, closing the sliding door behind him. Emma could see him through the glass, his back turned, one hand pressed to his forehead. He stayed on the balcony for 11 minutes. When he came back inside, his face was pale. Emma asked if everything was okay. David said fine, just a work issue. But his hands shook as he poured himself a drink, something Emma had never seen him do in the middle of the week.